Radio DePaul is Chicago's College Connection.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the second volume of Dylan's Discourse here on Radio DePaul, Chicago's College Connection. Once again, I'm your host, Dylan Cohn, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. With me is Cari Maher.
Hello.
Cari is an actor, writer, and improviser and producer. According to Facebook, her name is actually pronounced Tina Fey.
God. I have to update my Facebook.
Yeah, I love that. Cari has been in Chicago for 8 years and has studied and worked at several improv institutions here, and currently works with Knuckleball Comedy, Chicago Improv Productions, and American Immersive Theater. She also performs with all-female troupe Labia Majora.
Labia Majora. No, you're fine. I wish we were that cool, but no, we are Labia Majora.
Maybe in the next life. She also works with her duo prov team, Karen, with Aaron Sullivan, and is the creator and star of soon-to-be premiere web series FiveStars, based on her experiences as a rideshare driver, which I hope we get the chance to touch on. But more importantly, we're here to talk about the project she is currently executive producing, which is called Talking Crap.
Yeah, so it's not really called Talking Crap, but because we are being kind to our lovely folks here at DePaul University who have said that the S word is not appropriate, which is understandable, which is actually something that I want to talk about a little bit because it has been kind of interesting promoting it. For the purposes of this conversation, it's Talking Crap, but it's really called Talking So if you look for us on Facebook, that's how you would find us.
Yes. So with that being said, Talking Crap is an all-femme, non-binary variety show composed of 4 parts: a table discussion covering a surprise news story, an interview portion with an expert regarding a pressing political issue, stand-up, burlesque, femme performance of any type, ending in an improv performance influenced by the preceding discourse and everything that's come beforehand.
Exactly. Yep. You nailed it. It's almost like you saw the show, which you did on Monday, which was so exciting to see you there. It was fantastic to be able to talk to someone who's actually seen the show, right? Which is fantastic. Yeah. So that's pretty much the long and short of it. That's the show. It's at the Crowd Theater on Mondays at 8 p.m. It is $10. We pay our performers and our the solo acts, and we either pay the interview guest or we give a donation on behalf of a charity that they are looking at. So that is why we have set the ticket price at $10. We are the more expensive show at the Crowd Theater if you've been there before. But that was really important for me, is to make sure that all of our cast was paid in some capacity, even if it's $10, so that they got some money for their work.
Yes, and I commend you for that because that is a rarity.
It's not a common thing in Chicago or anywhere.
Not. And I will say, as someone who has been to the show, they pack enough in there to justify the price. So if you are not doing anything on a Monday night, I highly encourage you to go. Now, we're going to dig a bit more into the pre-production, rehearsal process, everything that went into making Talking Crap what it is today. As many of you may know, this is a continuation of a show I started in the summer. The focus of this season is more to talk about theater, comedy, and what I like to call other nonsense in Chicago, because what are we all doing here? You know what I mean? And with that being said, this season I'm going to try to bring in a lot of local artists and people who are putting things up, being in things, who are on their creative endeavors, and I want to offer them the platform to talk about what they're up to. One of those people here with me today is Cari Maher.
Yay!
And she is executive producer of Talking Crap, which we're about to dig into. So, with that being said, Cari, how does Talking Crap differ from previous projects of yours?
So, I mean, it doesn't... This is a hard one because I don't know if it differs like a ton from a lot of things that I do. I've always had a big interest in feminism and comedy and propagating the goal of making sure that women are seen and heard on comedy stages. I started in comedy probably as long as I've been doing theater. I've been doing theater since I was a kid, and I was always kind of put into the comedy roles in different plays that I was doing and things like that. So I've always been that person, and it's always been kind of a hard thing for me because it's always been like, oh, you're funny for a girl, or you're like, we were really surprised you were funny because you are a girl. And it's always been kind of an upward battle in that regard. I started doing comedy a lot more in college. I was in a sketch comedy group in college called Lunchbox Voodoo. I went to Eastern Illinois University. Go Panthers! And I mean, there was a decent amount of equality for 2003 on a college campus, but it was still very much like, there was like a literal discussion within that group one time if women were funny, and like even though they had cast women in the group, and there was like literally being told to our faces like we were there for eye candy. And like I'm still very good friends with a lot of the people in that group, but like I'm also not very good friends with a lot of people from that group, right. So like we just had a reunion last year, and it was definitely the more open-minded liberal group of that, and that's like a thing you have to face, and you're constantly facing that. So for me, I always, even doing like indie teams and things like that, like I never wanted to be one woman in a face of like 8 white dudes in a show. Like that's never been something I ever wanted to do. And it was always like, I'd rather not do comedy than do comedy like this. So I have been very fortunate that the men that are in my life that I do comedy with now are wonderful allies, and they're people that I really love working with. But it took like 15 years to like curate a group of people that I wanted to continuously work with. 8 of those years being here in Chicago. There's some people that I've worked with for the last like 7 years that I absolutely love working with. And I'll talk more about that when we start talking about FiveStars, because without them, I don't think that show would have ever happened. Mm-hmm. There's people that, you just sort of meet along the way. But what really started this journey or got me like kicked in the butt a little bit more to do this show. I directed an all-women showcase last fall. And it was like around September, October, November, I think it was. And it was a storytelling improv form, and I loved it, and it was like one of the most empowering, wonderful things to have like all these women in a room, but I didn't feel like it was inclusive enough. There's the theater that I was working at where I did that show. I don't believe there are any non-binary people, but I think the sad fact is that I never asked, and that's something that I kind of kick myself for never really broaching that subject or talking about it. And I always wanted to do more like political art. I guess if I were going to say how is this different than other things I've done, I think I took a little bit of a backseat, really working more on coaching generic long-form improv teams for a really long time, which I really love doing, and I love curating that. But it was definitely kind of your, basic, we do a show, like here's 8 people who are all really wonderful humans and a great group of 8 people. But there's no form, there's nothing else to it. There's no statement being made about it. And my coaching has always been very much when I coach of like, here's how you do satire, or this is how, like if somebody says something inappropriate to a teammate, on stage, then it's like, hey, this is how we can turn it to make that person empowered. But that wasn't the goal of it necessarily. So I've been loving the fact that I've been able to sort of walk away from coaching long form teams to really coaching something that's a little bit more constructed in a manner that's more political, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that would be probably my main difference. But I do love doing anything that's like more political or more gender based, for sure.
Right.
And right now I'm like almost only doing improv with women or non-binary people. I don't remember the last time I did I stepped in with a team called Uncle Bobo a couple weeks ago, and I think it was the first time I had done improv with a guy in like 6 months. Dang. So I'm like, oh, that's like whoops. I should probably.
I don't know how to interact with you, man
person. And of course, I immediately made a penis joke, which is like the worst thing that you can possibly do.
What can you do?
Yeah,
sometimes that happens.
It happens. So I would say like that's where it's a bit like my biggest step away from it, for sure. Would be it's no longer just coaching an improv team. I feel like I'm coaching like a collective of people for a common purpose, which I think is really neat and interesting.
Right. I feel like a lot of the times you see improv groups, and yes, they're funny, and yes, it's a good time to it's a good thing to do on like a Saturday night or whatever. Mm-hmm. But like a lot of the times, what intrigues me more so about theater than improv is that there's always like a message, or there's always a point, sure, and there's always like a mission behind it.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was something that really I haven't done a play that was more than 10 minutes in probably 10 years. I did Summer Stack years and years ago, and which was great. Shout out to the Pioneer Playhouse out in Danville, Kentucky. Got my start out there. And it was wonderful, and it was great. And again, I was like the funny person, but I was really empowered to be the funny person. I was cast to be the funny person, and it was very much like, at that theater, not only did we have the plays that we were doing, but also we would have like open mic nights and things like that. And the current artistic director, Robbie Henson, was kind of the interim artistic director there during my time there, and really like cultivated some of that like talent for me to go and often write things and do funny stuff and kind of let me be like the weirdo I was always meant to be. Yeah. And I think that's really important, to have people who are really cool with you being a weirdo and let you be a weirdo and allow that to sort of like flourish and grow. And what you said about like theater being something that is a statement, I do miss that a little bit. One of like the biggest shows that I've done in my life, and I'm like 33, I'm not saying I'm super old, but I've had like a pretty decent career so far. But honestly, I was 18 years old and I did the Laramie Project, and that's the reaction that comes from most people when they hear the Laramie Project. And it was one of those things where like it was 2000, I guess it was 2002, so now it's like 16 years ago. Hi everybody from that cast, a lot of them are listening, I think. We're all still friends with each other. This was like my senior year of high school. For some of them it was their freshman year, and like a lot of us are still in show business or theater or something in some capacity. One person is here in Chicago, Max Gannett. He's a improviser, does a lot over at I.O. There's people out in New York, LA, just like all over the country still doing theater and still doing this. But it's a political show. And it was something for me that like if I was going to do theater, if I was going to do art, it was always important for me to continue doing that political work. I think that art and politics are so intertwined with each other because of free speech and because of artists in a lot of ways are oppressed people, depending on a lot of different things, whether it's an economic oppression or a gender oppression or a sexuality oppression. There's just so much that makes it almost impossible for us to divide ourselves from it. So it's a weird thing for me that improv doesn't have quite that same thing. It's starting to now because we're seeing a lot of women in comedy. Excuse me for a second. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm getting over a cold right now, everybody, so I apologize. We're seeing with women in comedy and some of the things that are happening there, I think improv is starting to get a lot more political than it used to be, which is really exciting to see. I
agree, for sure. Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. What I will say, speaking about women and non-binary people finding an opportunity for their voices to be heard. I just heard earlier today that Chicago artist, I'm so sorry if I mispronounce your name, Ego Nwodim, was just added as a feature player and writer on Saturday Night Live, and she's a Chicago woman of color.
Which is fantastic.
I know.
I did not hear that. I have been, as I said, I'm really sorry. I've been sick all day, so I've been drinking tea and watching Game of Thrones. But this is awesome, and I'm so glad to see, like, there's so much great Chicago talent that's going on SNL and things like that. When Chris Redd going on either last year or the year before, and his talent and seeing, like, a woman of color going on SNL, it always is an amazing thing, and it's always great to see that diversity in the city is lacking in a big way. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I wish I had a drink or something.
R.I.P. headphone users.
During next time we have a break, I'll go run and grab some water.
Yeah, we can go on a break after you finish.
Okay, but I think that like we don't have nearly enough diversity. There's been a lot of talk right now about Improvised Shakespeare Company and their lack of women,
white dudes.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I think that's something that's really missing from the conversation. Is like, as a woman, of course, I'm always going to like radiate towards issues of gender, and I think as like a white person, I do sort of like put up a blind eye sometimes just because I don't see it, because it's not something that I'm used to. Just like I think sometimes men don't see sexism, but I looked through the cast list of Improvised Shakespeare Company, and I think they have maybe one or two people of color, and they don't use any of them in their promotion shots, like at all. You have to like go digging to go find people of color, and I think that's a really big part of that conversation that we're missing. Is like, yes, there's no women, and that really stinks. And they have like a whole thing about not having women, but they don't have a caveat about not having people of color. That's just a choice.
Yeah.
Like, that's just something they decided. And I believe that their auditions, and if I'm wrong, I apologize to anyone. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that they need to apologize, but I will apologize anytime I do say something incorrect. I did read somewhere that their auditions are invitation only. So, I mean, you can always say, like, oh, a certain number of people didn't show up to audition, which I will say, like, for Talking Crap, like, we didn't have as much diversity as we wanted because I didn't have people show up for, like, as much diversity show up as I would have liked, but I can't force people to, like, be in my show so I can be really kind and diverse. But if it is an invitation only audition, then you have nobody to blame but yourself when you're... Them. Yeah, if you don't have that. So I think that's something that we had to continue to incorporate into these conversations. That, yes, women are getting bad shakes on this, but pun intended a little bit. Bad shakes,
yeah. Ooh, yikes.
But I think it's also really important that we understand that, like, and it's great that there are some people of color in the cast. I don't want to say, like, they aren't enough of it, but I think it is a little strange that they're not used in any of the marketing materials. Like, zero. The only reason I didn't want to make that claim before I looked in their cast list was because I was like, well, I did look at a lot of different videos and press clippings and things like that, and you really do have to search to find a person of color anywhere in that cast, which is really, really bizarre and strange that, like, they didn't take any publicity photos with people of color. Like, I don't know. It's really, really bizarre. So something to kind of keep in mind. For those of you who don't know, look up Improvised Shakespeare Company on Facebook or literally anywhere that people are talking about improv. They don't allow women on their show.
Yeah. Love that. So with that being said, we're going to kind of shift gears back over to Talking Crap. But first we're going to take a little song break. No, girl, do what you got to do. Go drink some water.
Okay.
In producing a show that is all femme, non-binary exclusive, what was the response you got from the Chicago area or your family?
I don't think, like, it's changed a lot over the last couple of years. So I've had this idea for a while. I've had this idea since I was married, and I am not married anymore. So, like, that gives you an idea. And I think people at first were like, that's cute. And then they kind of, as things got worse and worse and worse for women, not just in the world, but in comedy itself. I think if I could have done it, ideally I would have liked to have done this show probably a year ago.
Yeah.
When things were really, for women in comedy, I think we really, really hit a low point about a year ago. And it just wasn't a viable option for me a year ago between other things I was working on. And I think, like, the Women's Showcase certainly helped kind of fill that, but it was never really the show that I wanted to do. It was just the show that was easiest to do. The show's a lot of work. It requires a lot of getting your solo acts. It requires lining up interview guests. It requires a cast that knows each other and can play with each other pretty well. It requires all these different things. So it's not something that you can kind of, like, when someone calls me this afternoon and they say, hey, will you jump in with my improv team tonight? I'm not going to today because I don't feel great, but, like, I could easily be like, yes, like, I'm going to go and, like, jump in and do that show, and it's not a big deal. If someone had a space and said, hey, Cari, can you get, like, 4 improv teams to come do a show tonight? Honestly, like, because of where I'm at in my career right now, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to, but where I am right now, I could probably get 4 improv teams to come in and do this show.
Right.
That's not what this show is. And that's what makes it really, really difficult to go in there. So I don't think too many people were too, like, oh, that's a bad idea. I think what's interesting is when I first started with this idea, it was originally, like, 5 years ago, the show in my brain was actually originally called Ladies Talking Crap. And it was all this, like, girl power and, like, we're kicking butt, and it was all Beyonce music, and it was all, like, all this kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what changed for me was starting to hear some discussions about gender. And that's why I'm glad I waited a year to do it, because we really started unpacking a lot of gender terms and ways that we think about gender that are a lot different than they were 5 years ago. And now the idea of putting ladies at the top of this show is, like, an unheard of concept for me. And I think that's where it changed a little bit. And I think talking with people more, that would be more the reaction I got, is like, why are you limiting it to women? Like, there are other people out there who are going through a lot right now with their gender identity, who are not cis males, who are not figuring things out, but are figuring out, they figured themselves out. They're figuring out where they live in this world, and especially in the comedy world of like, what box do I check? What am I? Can I try out for improvised Shakespeare? Like kind of these like funky. That was actually something I saw somebody ask. It was in a Facebook discussion. It was a trans man asking like, can I try out for this? Like, am I allowed, if I am trans, like, can I try out for this show? And so addressing some of those gender issues, it's like, it's mind-boggling to me when people like are confronted with something that they may have been wrong about, and then they they're immovable on that. And it's like, I feel pretty good about saying, I'm not good, like I'm not like, yay, I was good for me for being wrong. But it's weird for me that like it's so hard for people to just say like, oh, that was something I was really wrong about. And 3, 4, 5 years ago when I first came up with this, it was wrong of me to like want to name a show called Ladies Talking Crap, and now I know that, and people change, and it's okay to be like a little bit valuable. And I think that's like really the ambition of this show, is rather than having two opposing sides just yelling at each other and being like, you're the worst, no, you're the worst, no, you're a Nazi, no, you're a Nazi, like, where it's like, no, wait, like, let's like break it down a little bit and say like there's nuance and there's subtlety and there's room here to learn something and grow and to be able to walk away from something. As far as my family goes, like my family's always known I'm a weirdo. So like, I think like, I don't know, I'm 33 now, and I like my parents have seen me do like terrible commedia shows. They've seen me do like really, really bad sketch shows. Like I remember one in particular in college where like my parents had to watch like somebody else playing with a dildo on stage. Like they've seen all of it. Comedy. Like comedy. Yeah. It's so fun. What a moment. And so I think for them, neither of them are, I mean, they raised me, so for them, I don't think it's weird for either. My parents are divorced now, so I've had 2 different conversations with them about this show and about what I wanted to do with it. And like my mom's side of the family is like very matriarchal, as far as like there's like my mom, and she has sisters, and there's like a whole bunch of us that still like talk to each other very regularly. Like female cousins and aunts that are like talk to each other. When I say a lot, I mean like daily. We're on Facebook Messenger, like sending each other stuff and playing HQ together. And like I asked them which questions I should use on the show before I do. I'm like, this is like, should I do this? Should I do that? And so like they're like very like dyed-in-the-wool liberal feminists. Like this is like not a crazy thing for them. It's not a crazy thing for anybody. Yeah, I don't think. My dad's side of the family is like the exact opposite. Super patriarchal. There was 7 children. There's still 7 children. That sounded like really like, and they all died in the war. No, they're all still alive. But there's 7 children. My dad's the oldest of 7, and out of those 7 children, 5 are boys. So very like loud and masculine and F-bombs and like all this stuff. So for them, like it was not weird to have a show either that like had a swear word in it or anything. But my dad's approach to it was very interesting because he immediately had like different interview questions, not interview questions, but discussion questions. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting getting a male perspective of what was interesting to talk about. Like a male, I wouldn't call my dad a Republican. He was a Republican for years. He is much more of an independent. I'd almost say a libertarian at this point, if I had to give my dad a political label. But I think he's going through his own sort of like Republican like awakening of like, what am I? What am I doing here? How did I, what is this?
Many are.
How did I get this beautiful wife? But like that kind of like awakening, because he's not really sure where his place is either. So when I have conversations with him, I've always had political conversations with my parents. I think our parents know each other and our art way more than we give them credit for. I feel like when I was your age, but I think
many moons ago.
It was many. I mean, in some ways it was. In some ways it feels like I blinked my I graduated from college yesterday, and in some ways I feel like I've gone through this whole journey. But like when you're younger, I do think you have this fear of like showing anyone your art's so precious, or like you're worried that it's a stupid idea. And then you see more art and you realize like some people are taking these major risks and they're paying off, and some people are taking major risks and they're not paying off. I've seen one-man shows of Moby Dick that like I wouldn't necessarily like know how to do that, and I'm glad somebody did that. I'm glad somebody put like their life's effort into doing that show. But I think we worry so much about like what people will think about our art, and now like my art is like much less precious than it was when I was younger. This show's a little bit different because I feel like I built it up so much in my head. But my parents have seen all kinds of weird stuff happen with me, so they think they're happy that I have a little bit more focus on this project. Everyone wanted to call this The View when I first told them about it, which is why there's so much like in the advertising for the show about like this ain't The View. And a lot of men wanted to call it The View. And I'm like, just because there's like a gathering of women does not make it like, it's sad to me that we only have one example of like a group of women coming together to talk about something, because we see it so many times on other talk shows. Everyone's gonna hate me in about 2 seconds, but like we'll talk about like, oh, like there's not enough female representation, and then everyone's like, but what about Melissa McCarthy? And I'm like, well, first of all, I don't like Melissa McCarthy. I know, I'm really sorry.
No, that's fair.
I thought she was great in Gilmore Girls. Love her in Gilmore Girls. She's great in I think it's called St. Vincent, the movie that she's in with Bill Murray. She's a really phenomenal actress, but I don't love her as a comedian. And also people are like, well, we gave you this one human who does stuff.
You should worship her.
Yeah, same with like Amy Schumer and same with Chelsea Handler. And like Amy Schumer has some issues with like more for her politically than I do for her like comedically. Chelsea Handler, I think, is the opposite, where like I used to have a real big problem with her as a feminist. And I think that like once she got a Netflix show and she was able to do what she wanted to do, I saw a totally different side of Chelsea Handler, which is fantastic, and was like, wow, like this is what somebody, again, like people who are freaked out about the idea of change or like developing who they are, and like they feel like they have to stick in the ground of like, this is who I was, and so this is who I will always be. But it's like, oh, cool, you came in with 3 people. Let me give you the laundry list of men I've had to watch for my entire life. And then we don't even really cover like non-binary comedians. We don't cover any like gender fluid comedians. We don't we have zero representation, or very, very minimal representation. And all of a sudden now everyone's like, but we have Nanette for the lesbians. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, but like again, like there should be a lot more equal representation in art. So so like I feel I got like, that was the part where I would get frustrated with men talking to me about the show, and they always had like some way to change it in a way of like, you should do this or you should do that. And it's like, I know, like I'm open to constructive criticism, but I'm more, and I still take not criticism, but I do take changes, and I take like advisement from people whose opinions who I trust, that I ask for. But this wasn't even an idea yet, and people wanted to change it and put their own spin on it. And I'm like, this is a little bit much. And so, yeah, I think that like this is like the concept certainly evolved over time as far as that being. It used to not be as big of a deal for me to pay people. That came about in the last year or so. It used to be I was going to try to do the show for free, or I was going to try to do the show where you brought in a box of menstrual products as admission, and then I would just eat the cost of it. And I still think that there is a version of this show that does do that, of like, you know, when it's very, very successful, and maybe like we can balance out paid performers and having a charitable element to it. But that was a big part of it for me, was there's a lot of, the reason like the donating of menstrual products is that a lot of homeless shelters, battered women's shelters, places, even like gay community centers, with like runaways and things like that, like they don't have the products that they need. And sometimes it's difficult for like people in the trans community to obtain those products in a safe manner. So for me, it was about like getting products to those people that might need them, who otherwise could not attain them. So that was a big part of it for me. And then as this progressed, and as I got like, I kept doing more art, and I kept doing more art where I was working a lot for very little money or no money. This year, I made it my determination of like, I'm going to take very few jobs that don't pay. And I've done pretty well with that. The 3 companies that you talked about at the top are all 3 companies that pay me for my work and my value.
Good.
And and I think that it's important to try to do it as, and like and it sounds so silly, like here's $10, you're welcome, but like at least it's something that the people get.
You could say that.
And
just to backpedal a little bit, I did write earlier in my notes that I also called your show If the View Mattered.
Oh, sure. Yeah. 100%. And like, And it definitely is, like, I mean, it's hard to, like, move away from it. Well, like, when The View premiered, it was, like, a really, really important show. Like, if you remember, like, the people who were on it early on, and I think they're still trying. And that was something, actually, like, the thing that was kind of a disappointment with this, as far as, like, auditioning people and getting, like, I love my cast, and I think that my cast also, I worked with most of my cast in the past, but the cast is extremely left of center. I think our most, like, quote unquote Republican person is listed themselves as being left of center. And, like, it's like, ooh, wow, get out of here with your big money. Whereas, like, the rest of them are, like, so far left that it's not, it's, like, insane. I mean, I fit in that category as well. And I would have liked to have had somebody who could come in and be like, I'm a Republican female comedian, which is something that you don't have that much. Diversity comes in, like, so many different ways, as far as, like, racial diversity, age diversity. Like, age diversity is something we don't talk about in comedy at all. No. In any capacity. I did a show, and one of the people on the other teams in the lineup was a woman, probably over 50. And my mom was in the audience. And my mom made a comment to me afterwards of, like, how wonderful it was to see somebody who looked like her on stage, because she's been watching me do improv for years, and it's always been, like, 28-year-olds. Like, 28-year-olds are, like, the most saturated. I'm sorry to every 28-year-old out there listening right now, but you are so not in demand at this point in your life. Mm-hmm. If you're younger than 28, like, there's still, like, that youth, like, we're fascinated with, like, how, like, you should, like, quit college and just, like, go off and audition, because we're all obsessed with youth culture. Yeah, sorry, Dylan's parents. But, like, we're so oversaturated with, like, 26 to 28-year-olds in the comedy market today. And then after that time period, it's like, do you have value? Like, what are you? And at this point, I'm like, well, I'm in my 30s, so I guess I'll teach workshops. That's where I'm at, you know, like, that's what you do. And so, like, age diversity, racial diversity, sexual orientation diversity, gender diversity, and I know there's, like, a whole spectrum of gender diversity. It's not just so black and white with, like, male and female. You know, and we're kind of navigating some of those things but we also didn't really get the political diversity that I think would have been great. And I don't know how we incorporate political diversity into comedy without it turning into, like, a total yeah. And I say that knowing completely that, like, I'd still rather perform with liberal people because I'm super liberal, so I'm part of the problem. I'm a hypocrite, but I'd love to be across the room, you know. And then when I do meet, like, a Republican comedian, I usually don't like them. So I'm like, but no, please come and audition for my show. Mm-hmm. Whoops.
Yeah, that's hard to navigate.
It is hard to navigate, for sure.
So you called the concept of talking crap something you've had in your head for a really long time. What do you think was what set the ball in motion for that? What was
like to do it, to actually do it? So I quit my job, which is a huge one. So when you quit your job, you have a lot more time. I quit my job in February and decided that I was going to devote all of my time to freelance work. So I work at any given time, like 5 different jobs, between being a rideshare driver and then writing a web series about it, teaching kids after school, improv. I just started, I'll be doing my first show with them next month, Murder Mysteries, which I'm really excited about. Yes. Yeah, I'm really excited about that one. That's with American Immersive Theater. Going and doing big presentations in schools, as I do with Chicago Improv Productions. So I had a little bit more time that was my own, even though I was busy. And I'm like, anyone who, like, this, if any of you have friends out there that are freelancers, and if you ever say to them, like, it must be so nice to set your own schedule and have your own thing, like, please stop talking. Like, please don't ever. Freelancing is not as easy as people, like, think that it is. And it's a lot of wondering if you're going to be able to pay your rent at the end of the month. And it's scary and it's terrifying. But it does allow for you to have some of that. I'd want people to understand that, like, because I feel like sometimes people listen to these interviews and they're like, I can do anything if I put my mind to it. And you can't. You want to. You really, really want to, but you can't. So the biggest thing for me was, like, Like, I had a little bit of money because I sold a condo that I had from when I was married. And, like, that helped a lot. And, like, I think it's really ignorant to say, like, oh, you can just make anything out of wishes and hopes and dreams. And you really, like, you can't. I think I could have done this show without paying people with less money. But I wanted to wait until I could do it. I felt an ethical obligation to not fulfill my own passion project just for the sake of my own passion project until I could do it ethically. I worked at an improv theater for a long time, and I do believe in like ethical leadership, in this idea that you can't like leading just because you want the glory of leadership. You will always fail. Every single time you will always fail, because that is not like most people. Like, we get excited with, like, let's say presidential approval ratings when they're like, the president's approval rating is 54. Yay, that's 4% over like the halfway
what does
through.
that really mean?
Right. And so that means that 46% of people hate you. It's like, that's what it really comes down to, you know? And ethical leadership for me is knowing that, like, if I'm going to take people to go and live my dream with me, then I need to represent them in the best possible way. So I wanted to make sure that, like, this show was right. I wanted to make sure that the show was done at the right space. So the Crowd Theater is awesome and wonderful. They really do pay attention to the diversity of what their programming is, of their house teams. It's in a neighborhood that I really love. It's right on the border there between Lakeview and Uptown. I'm an Uptown resident myself. If you are a DePaul resident and you have not gone further north than like Belmont, please do so.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case. I know I worked with like Columbia students in the past, and they never left the Loop. And I'm like,
no, they are there, but a lot of myself included, a lot of DePaul students live up in Lakeview.
Oh, okay,
so
fantastic.
We're right up there.
Great. Okay, so that's good to hear, because I just remember being like, and as a rideshare driver too, I picked up some people who went to Northwestern who like never left Evanston.
No, they're there too.
Yeah, very, very strange. Hyde Park, same sort of deal. It seems like DePaul students are kind of a little bit cooler. I'm not pandering to my audience. Everybody,
we'll take it.
Yay! But it was important for me to have like the right space to do it. There was a couple of other theaters that I floated, and I was ultimately happy with the Crowd. But cost is huge, you know, like, I mean, it's not easy to put up work in this city. It's not easy to put up like ethically right work in this city. Sometimes like for me, I am probably like my biggest impediment, because I won't perform at spaces that I don't agree with their policies or their practices. I won't perform at places if I don't think that they're diverse enough. I don't perform at places that don't seem to be making the right steps towards certain things. So there's been plenty of theaters that I'm not going to name any of them, but plenty of theaters that have been in these conversations over the last year or so. And I think some are making great strides to do better. One in particular that like was a pretty big headline over the last couple of years, that I think is really started to make really good headway to kind of beat out some of that with Stage 773. I think like, and that's the other thing too about like being immobile. It's like that was a place where if you told me a year ago, like I would say I would never perform there again, or I'll never go see a show there again. And now I'm looking at them and going, yeah, like there is room for growth. There is room to say like, this is what we're doing and this is what we're saying. And like, this is what we stand behind. And I think that's like, as people are like, well, when are we going to forgive the men? I'm like, we probably won't. But like, we can at least, like the institutions that they were a part of, we can at least start having conversations about some of the things that that they're doing. But it was still important for me to like find those places that supported a mission, even though like the theater may not be like 100-seat theater. But what I'm finding right now is that like it's like with a smaller advertising budget and a smaller thing, I didn't need a 100-seat theater. I needed a place that supported my art, and like the Crowd Theater did that for sure. But yeah, I mean, like as far as like this show would have had to change a lot if it hadn't been for the fact that like there was some capital behind it that I could put behind it. Like I wish that I could come in here and be like, you young college kids, you're gonna all be able to go out and make your dreams happen. But like money's a big thing, and that's a big part of it. And like I want to, that'll be like my next mission probably, is like economic fairness in arts. Like once we start working on gender things, then it's gonna have to be like, well, wait a minute, like we can't just have rich people making, and I'm not rich, I don't want to make it seem like easy folks, like let's take it down a notch, but like we had to find a way for that, like people who can put up their work in a place. There's way too many theaters in the city that are closing down because they can't pay their rent. That's something we're actually going to be talking about on next week's show, is about rent quality or rent, how high rents are going in Chicago right now. Emerald Caton is coming in from the 35th ward, which I believe is like Albany Park in that area. And she's going to come in and talk about rent stabilization. Which I think is like, it sounds like, oh, wow, how interesting. But it's like, no, it really does affect so many different things here. Small businesses are affected by it. Small theaters are affected by it. And until we have a place where like we can build some of these theaters up, but profit and nonprofit theaters alike are going downhill. And it really is like a scary thing for Chicago improv right now.
Yeah, well, yeah. I commend you a lot for sticking to your moral guns.
I try to.
We do what we can.
And then it does hurt. Like, I do feel like sometimes, like, I am my own, like, you can be your own impediment doing it, but I also sleep well at night. So, like, I'm never going to be famous, but I'd rather sleep. So.
We're wrapping up our time here, so we just want to give a few final thoughts on Talking Crap, where you can see it, what it's about, final remarks here. The show runs for the next 6 weeks. You can catch it Monday nights through October 29th, 8 p.m. at the Crowd. Go see it. It is worth every moment. I promise. I had a great time when I saw it last Monday.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So with that being said, once the run is up, where do you see it, the concept behind it, or the cast you've put together continuing afterwards?
So I knew pretty much, I'd either worked with or knew most of the cast going into this. There were a couple of people that I hadn't worked with, or I hadn't worked with in a long time, or I hadn't worked with in this capacity. I'm so excited that I got to work with them on this. We did have auditions, and then ultimately, like, the people who came to auditions were people that I had worked with before, outside of like a handful of other people that were really willing to like roll the dice and go on this journey with me, which I think is really exciting. And these are like the people that I know. I've worked with them, some of them for like 5-6 years, and I know I'm going to keep working with them. A lot of them are in Labia Majora, which is another group that I'm a part of that we talked a little bit at the top, which is kind of an all-female collective of improvisers. There's like 17 of us that like just go to whoever's available, goes and does the shows. So as far as like this show goes, I would love to keep this show going. It is an exhaustive process. So I think I would love to, like, after this is over, take the rest of the year off and figure out a way to produce this show ongoing for a long time. And whether that's at the Crowd, which would be great because they're great and they're walking distance from my apartment, which is always great. But like also like looking into like non-traditional spaces, looking into places like bars or community centers, moving it from the north side to the south side, or to the west side of the city, would be great. I think that there's not oversaturation, but there's certainly a near oversaturation of comedy on the north side of the city. And I would love to say like, hey, we're going to bring this show to a coffee shop in Hyde Park, or we're going to go someplace over in like Humboldt Park, and really bring this show to other places that aren't just like white women like me doing comedy on the north side of Chicago, which I think I think we've seen enough of that. So I'd love to bring this to other places. But I would love this to be an ongoing thing, even if it's like, oh, we take a month on and then a month off, or it becomes a monthly showcase, or it does something. I'd love to see it as a podcast. That would be like my number one thing that I would love to do, is like both interviews I've done so far, both with Jamila Shilo and then also with Sharayu Patel, who you saw last week. We're both people that I was like, I could talk to you for 2 hours and just like really get to know who you are. So if nothing else, like I'd love to take those interviews things. I was either going to be a theater major or a journalism major, and I love that I can do both of these things. So eventually, like if I can't do like all the stuff with Talking Crap on stage, like I'd love to take it off stage and do a podcast. That would be the best thing. Like ideally though, I'd love to just come back in January and keep doing it at the Crowd. Like honestly, like I would love that. That'd be great.
It's a great series.
Yeah, for sure. But I think like even then, like I would love to, like if all 17 of the people that are currently in the cast right now wanted to do it with me, that's great. If they don't, like I would love to see new people, different. Like I would love to keep the cast rotating and like meet a variety of new people. But there's also something to be said about like going to the dance with the people that asked you. So like that, and like those people who like have kind of gone on this journey with me, like I can't, a really good like leader knows that they're not the smartest person in the room. And I've been really fortunate to have like a lot of people who are smarter than me come along with me on this journey. So yeah.
Yeah. With that being said, that's actually hilarious that you were choosing between journalism and theater. I started in journalism and
then
just
you moved
transferred into theater.
Okay.
And so that's hilarious. And I still want to find where those two roads meet.
Yeah.
I feel like they do. And they always do. And I feel like there's such a story to be told in that alone. So with that being said, as a teacher and former student of the arts, what piece of advice would you part onto someone?
That's so yeah, it's so hard. I mean, like everyone that you know right now is at some point important to you. I think like we teach networking to be this like gross thing. Going to networking events is gross, but building a network is not. Like it's about like, it sounds weird, but like go to parties, hang out with people a little too late in the night, like go and do some of these things. And I say this now because I know I'm like about to go blow off my friends to go home and sleep. But like, but like the people that you get to know, like when you network with people or when you're like curating like those people that you want to work with, like don't think about just how they'll benefit you. Like think about how you benefit them. Like when I go on Facebook, if I see someone's looking for a musical comedian or something, I immediately will like tag all my friends that I know are musical comedians. Like think about how you benefit your network as well as how they benefit you, because like it's gross to be that person who's constantly sucking out things from people, and like to be that person who like can give and take on both sides. Like be that person. Like it's so easy to get into fights with people when you're in college. You're constantly working with the same people. It's easy to get into fights as an adult when you're working with the same people over and over again. I have certainly burned bridges. I'm still burning bridges sometimes. I just mean it now when I do it. And so like definitely like build those bridges with people. You literally don't know. I had somebody from my high school come and show up to the show on Monday, and like it was so wonderful to see her, and she's such an amazing person. Hi, Lisa. If you're listening, you never know. Like you never know who has your back and who has your corner. So like be kind. Be kind to people.
Be kind. Imparting words. Be kind. So with that being said, make sure you see Talking Crap over at the Crowd, 8 p.m. Monday nights. $10 that actually goes towards paying artists that perform, and that says a lot. Cari, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Dylan.
Where can people find you? Drop your ats, whatever.
So you can find us on Facebook at Talking SHIT. If you type that in, you'll find it. You can see pretty soon FiveStars is going to be out. I talked with the editors a couple days ago, and we're almost done with the pilots. And that you can follow us on ShowPup. And that's it. Thank you so much. Follow me on Cari Maher. Bye.
Thank you.